say a little bit, and we'll meditate. And then, as usual, have a chance for a conversation after a short break at the end. I'm going to say a little bit about thought in meditation. As we start to get concentrated, thought usually starts to abate, but it doesn't disappear entirely. In fact, with the absorptions, the dhyanas, thought can still be present into the dhyana, certainly in the first dhyana. But what tends to happen with thought is it tends to go more to the background. So normally we are fixated on the thinking mind. It's a bit like radio. So when we're sort of strongly tuned into a radio station, everything's coming through loud and clear, and it's quite hard to meditate with the radio on. But as we start to become absorbed, it's like we're sort of tuning out. Thoughts tend to go into the sort of background, even into that sort of like static, sort of tuning out of that wave band of fixated thinking. But what can happen is that thought can arise that is, as it were, not coming on one of those sort of normal frequencies. And this can particularly happen in meditation because we're clearing away a space. So sometimes what can emerge into consciousness in that space, aside from emotions and feelings, is also thoughts coming up from the depths. What to do when that happens? Well, my tendency is just to kind of not hook onto them. So if a thought is coming up from a sort of stronger place than normal, if it's important, the content of that thought, you can just allow to come into consciousness and pass away. But it can be a moment of distraction, and something kind of deeper just sort of emerges from the depths, and we want to sort of jump onto that thing. So it can lead us off into distraction. So just to notice that can happen. The other thing that can happen in terms of thoughts is thoughts that arise that are directed towards the meditation itself. My experience of those is that actually they're not thoughts in the normal kind of sense. So we might be thinking about the meditation, but there's also that whole dimension to our experience, which is just being aware of, and it has its own kind of language. So we can come into relationship to our experience without the need for thought. So there's going to be quite a sort of pre-verbal experience of things passing through the mind. For instance, becoming aware that there's some tension in the shoulders isn't exactly a thought, is it? It's just that you become aware of it and you can do something about it without having to get caught into thought at all. Partly why this is interesting is that we think that we can't really function without our cognitive mind constantly running. And I would say that's not actually true. We can function without that cognitive mind constantly running. And in a way, this is one of the discoveries of meditation, I think, meditative life, is that we can start to live our life much more directly without the need for this constant tendency to refer to the thinking mind. Okay, so once thoughts start to abate, because we've been staying with the object, whatever that is, the breath in the case of the mindfulness of breathing, we start to move into what's called access concentration. So access concentration means access to dhyana, access to the absorptions. And it's characterized by a greater and building tendency to indistractability or undistractability. This is a phrase that I think it's Lee Brassington in his excellent book, Right Concentration, uses to describe meditation, meditative path. So we're trying to become sort of undistractable. And the effort goes into not being pulled off into those distractions. So I think a useful kind of quality in that is a sense of kind of renunciation. Because in a way we are renouncing part of our experience. We're renouncing that tendency to get caught up into the thinking mind. So, with renunciation, there is always a little bit of effort to put something down. But what comes with that effort to put something down is also a kind of pleasure and joy in putting that thing down, particularly when it's a thinking mind, because as I'm sure we've all already noticed, once we get away from that dominance of the thinking mind, our own experience starts to become much more calm, peaceful, delightful. Even. So that's kind of the power of renunciation. It's renouncing in order to move towards a greater place of peace. So I would say that's a useful kind of attitude to have with this indistractability, this faculty that we're trying to build up with the meditation. Maybe one more thing about effort at this point. I'm sure you all know this, and it goes without saying, but it's a very easy thing to continually fall into. And that's the judging mind. It's such a part of our experience to judge whatever is going on in ourselves. So the mind getting distracted is what the mind does. It's just what it does. It's absolutely natural. That's the way it is. It's probably an evolutionary thing, because if we tended to become fixated on our environment, when we were hunter-gatherers, it could be quite dangerous for our survival. We needed the sort of mind that could be constantly able to sort of move from one thing to the other. So the mind is just naturally, evolutionarily like that. There is absolutely nothing wrong with the fact that our mind gets distracted. It's just what minds do. So there's no judgment about being somebody who gets distracted in meditation. It's just what the mind does. Everybody's mind. So all we can do with that, we can't do away with the mind's tendency to become distracted just like that. All we can do is apply ourselves to this undistractability, which is really this patient effort just to come back to a single object of focus, the breath. And any attempts to try and force that to happen are always going to result in going back into the hindrances. Okay, that's all I was going to say. Right, so let's set up for a meditation then. So I'll lead us in with just a bit of taking stock of what's here now, and a little look at the hindrances and what's present, and then we'll go into the body. So we'll do a body descent, and then we'll come back to picking up on the breath, and then we'll go from there. And maybe keep in mind that phrase from Shayla Catherine, a natural release into present moment experience. We'll just pay some attention to our posture, making sure we've got a stable base, and that out of that stable base there's a sense of uprightness of the upper body, a sense of alertness that is being given by the posture. So if the body is set well by the posture, it aids the meditation. So we're mirroring in our body posture the meditative frame of mind. So strong, stable, but alert and awake. So make any adjustments to the posture that help with that. It's also useful to take stock of our mental states. So again, there's no judgment about our mental state. What is here is what is here. That helps the meditation to know a bit about where we're starting from. So the last few weeks we've been looking at the tendencies that are possible within the mind, the 5 hindrances. There's a broad outline of kind of energetic patterns that the mind can get into. And we were starting that with the question about being here now, how we feel about being here now, whether we feel content, at ease in ourselves in this moment, or whether that there's some sense of dis-ease that's being played out in one of the tendencies, of the hindrances. So there's craving, which is trying to supplant a sense of dis-ease in this moment by thinking into the future, into some imagined pleasure. And the tendency energetically with this is like a reaching forward towards something. So noticing if that tendency is here. And if it is, draw the attention back into the body, back into the torso. Which may bring us back to the sense of dis-ease. But if it does, just try to dwell with that sense of dis-ease, of what doesn't want to be here. And the movement in the opposite direction to craving is aversion. So out of a sense of dis-ease with the present moment, we try to push it away. So thoughts that play out a sense of aversion to what is. Interestingly, they're often thoughts associated with past events, replaying past hurts, or just pushing against the general sense of discomfort with our present experience. So noticing if that's present. Tendency to push away. Energetically, it feels like something traveling backwards out of the body. And again, just notice that that's what's going on. Coming back into the center. Back into the torso. And on the vertical axis, there can be a tendency to move out of this present moment experience by dropping into sloth and torpor, to sleepiness. the energy wants to drop down through the body, drop down into unconsciousness. So notice if that's going on. If it is, again, drawing the energy up, back into the center. And then in the opposite direction, if there's restlessness and anxiety, tendency for the energy to move up into the head. Restless in the body, anxious in thoughts. If we notice pulling that way, again, just coming down, bringing the locus of attention down into the body. The last hindrance is doubt and indecision. Again, this is much a mental hindrance, going round and round in thoughts, not being able to decide or commit. It can be like a vagueness about what's going on. Trying to find what's at the back of any of these hindrances. Is that a question about what doesn't want to be here? So all of this is the setting up of conditions for meditation. We're going to do a body scan. So unhooking from the thinking mind, coming into the direct sensate experience of the body. The face, the eyes, the lips, the jaw, the back of the head, wherever we notice sensation. Allowing attention to join with those sensations. down to the neck and throat. Keeping with sensations that we find in the neck and throat area. Even if those sensations are quite vague, just resting with them, they can become more pronounced. The upper chest. Sensations in the upper chest. Down to the bottom of the rib cage, diaphragm, looking for the sensations. And down to the lower abdomen, the area below the navel. Looking for the sensations. And taking in the body as a whole. Noticing whatever sensations are there throughout the body. The feet, the hands, torso, the arms, the legs. The head, the top of the head. And staying with that idea of the natural release into present moment experience. Turning our attention to the breath. So noticing whatever sensations there are in the body that are associated with the breathing. The rise and fall of the abdomen. Expansion of the chest. Tingling sensations around the upper lip and mouth area where the air comes into the body. So we're going to choose just one of those sensations. So I suggest we just choose the body sensation that seems most available, most predominant. So maybe the sensation is around the lips and nostrils, but it may not be. Maybe the abdomen, maybe the chest. So rather than thinking of forcefully focusing on the sensation, just allow that sensation to fill more and more of our experience. As it were, surrender more of our awareness into the sensation, natural release into bodily sensation. So this way can be a bit more like the breath does the mindfulness of breathing, rather than us having to do the mindfulness of breathing. So just letting the breath take over. Taking stock to check we aren't starting to slip into one of the hindrances. So if you want to, using that energetic approach, so the energy's gone up, back to the head, whether it's sunk down into the body, whether it's pulling towards something that's not here or pushing away. Or whether it's Just steady, centered in the torso. And see whether we can surrender a bit more into the breath. Gently maintaining that space of undistractability. Noticing the pleasure that can come from renouncing the hindrances. Pleasure in the body, pleasure in the breath.